Every human being operates on an internal map of predictable outcomes. They move through life calculating exactly how much effort they need to expend to keep you exactly where they want you. For months, perhaps years, you have been a fixed variable in their equation. You were the one who texted first. You were the one who adjusted your schedule. You were the one who gave away your most valuable asset, your attention, completely for free. And because your presence was guaranteed, your value in their subconscious mind dropped to zero. They didn't respect you, not because you aren't respectable, but because you were entirely predictable. Human nature dictates that we do not value what we do not have to fight for. But then something shifted. You stopped. Right now, as you read these words, a profound psychological crisis is brewing in that person's mind. They have just crossed the threshold of realization. They opened their phone, looked at their notifications, analyzed the silence, and the terrifying truth finally hit them. You are no longer chasing. The absolute certainty they built their ego upon has just vanished. This is not a minor inconvenience for them. It is a direct, destabilizing threat to their sense of control. When you pull back your energy, you create a massive psychological vacuum. Human psychology loathes a vacuum, and the brain will do everything in its power to fill it. What you are about to witness in the coming days is not love, and it is not a sudden awakening of their affection. It is a calculated, desperate, and often entirely subconscious behavioral pattern designed to pull you back into the cage of predictability. They are about to execute a series of highly specific maneuvers to test your resolve, to see if your silence is just a temporary bluff or a permanent eviction. If you do not know exactly what behavioral phases they are about to cycle through, you will fall right back into their trap the moment they throw you a crumb of attention. You will mistake their panic for love, and the cycle of manipulation will reset. Only this time, they will hold the leash even tighter. This speech is your tactical blueprint. We are going to strip away the emotional noise and look at the raw human mechanics of what happens next. You will learn the exact 3 phases they will use to test your boundaries, the hidden behavioral tells that prove they are panicking behind a mask of indifference, and the precise moment they will try to break your silence. If you want to stop being the chess piece and finally start playing the grandmaster, you cannot afford to look away from what I am about to reveal. The counter move has already begun. Look at the person next to you, or think about the person currently occupying the quietest corners of your mind. For a long time, they believed they owned the rights to your emotional stability. They operated under the absolute assumption that no matter how poorly they managed the relationship, no matter how cold their responses became, your attention would remain a baseline certainty. But the silence you generated over the past few days has disrupted their psychological equilibrium. Right now, their brain is screaming for validation, scramblingly trying to figure out how the hunter suddenly became completely invisible. If you do not understand the exact behavioral responses they are profiling to launch against you next, you will misinterpret their desperation as genuine affection and forfeit the psychological upper hand you just gained. This is not a game of romance. It is a study in human behavior, control, and authority. By the end of this breakdown, you will know exactly what they will do next, why they are doing it, and precisely how to remain completely unshakable. When you chase someone, you feed their primitive need for status and security. You become their emotional anchor, allowing them to drift as far out to sea as they want, because they know they can always pull the rope and bring you back. The moment you drop the rope, the anchor vanishes. Their immediate internal reaction is not grief. It is a cognitive dissonance that borders on panic. The human brain is a prediction machine, and you have just broken the code. They are currently asking themselves a highly volatile sequence of questions. Did they find someone else? Did I lose my touch? Have I lost my power over them? To regain their balance, they must test the waters. They are forced to shift from a position of passive consumption to active surveillance. The first thing they will do is deploy what behavioral analysts call a scouting probe. This is a low-risk, high-yielding test designed to see if your line is still active. It will not be a grand apology. It will not be an admission of guilt. It will look like a late-night double text, a casual hey, an accidental social media interaction, or a meme sent without context. This is a tactical calibration. They want to see your response time. If you reply within 3 minutes, they instantly know the chase isn't over. You were just throwing a tantrum. The vacuum is filled, their ego is restored, and they will immediately return to ignoring you. If you want to maintain your sovereignty, you must recognize the scouting probe for what it is, a cheap bid for data. If the scouting probe yields absolute silence, their behavior will shift into phase 2, the validation test. When a target realizes their low-effort attempts are failing, the panic deepens, and it often masks itself as anger or complete indifference. You might see them post exaggerated displays of happiness on social media, deliberately broadcasting how well they are doing without you. This is a performance tailored for an audience of one, you. Alternatively, they may project anger, sending a message that accuses you of being distant or cold. This is a classic inversion technique designed to make you feel guilty, forcing you to break your silence to defend your character. Do not bite. Recognize that aggression and exaggerated indifference are both loud, neon signs of a fracturing ego. If you hold the line through the anger and the performance, they arrive at the final, most dangerous phase, the frantic reclamation. This is where they pull out the heavy artillery. They will tell you exactly what you have been dying to hear for months. They will offer sudden, unprompted vulnerability. They might say, "I've been thinking about us," or "I never realized how much you meant to me until now." This is the ultimate trap. It is incredibly difficult to resist because it feels like a victory. But biologically, it is simply an adrenaline-fueled attempt to escape the discomfort of rejection. If you surrender your position here, the moment they feel secure again, the old behavior will return with a vengeance. The human mind only values what it has the potential to lose. By walking away and stopping the chase, you haven't just changed the dynamic, you have reclaimed your currency. When they realize you are no longer chasing, they will try every trick in the behavioral playbook to pull you back into the loop. They will probe, they will perform, and they will plead. Your only move is to remain entirely unreadable. Do not react to the noise. Do not validate the panic. Let them sit in the silence they created, and let them finally learn the true cost of taking your presence for granted. Stay sovereign, stay silent, and keep moving forward. To truly understand the profound disruption that occurs when you stop chasing, you must first dissect the intricate behavioral architecture of the human ego. Every dynamic between two people establishes a baseline, a psychological status quo that dictates who holds the influence and who yields the power. For as long as you were pursuing them, you were actively validating their baseline. You were the hunter, perpetually tracking, adapting, and exerting energy, while they occupied the comfortable role of the prize. This constant output of your emotional and mental energy created a predictable ecosystem for them. Human beings are fundamentally wired to conserve energy. When they realize that they can receive your validation, your time, and your attention without having to expend any effort of their own, their brain categorizes you as a guaranteed asset. In behavioral profiling, we look at assets not by what they cost to acquire, but by how much security they provide. You became their psychological safety net. They could drift away, ignore your messages, prioritize other people, and treat you with casual indifference because they operated under the absolute certainty that your position on the map had not changed. They didn't have to watch you because they always knew exactly where you were, waiting for them. The moment you transition from the hunter to a ghost, you completely shatter this baseline. You don't just stop texting, you withdraw your emotional compliance. This sudden, unannounced cessation of energy creates an immediate vacuum in their environment. In the study of human behavior, a vacuum is a highly volatile state. The target's brain is forced to rapidly pivot from passive consumption to an emergency reevaluation of your perceived value. Because human nature dictates that we measure the value of an object or a person by the scarcity of its availability, your sudden absence causes your value to skyrocket in their subconscious mind. When you were readily available, you were cheap. When you become entirely unavailable, you become a premium luxury that they can no longer afford. This forces a massive internal shift. The target can no longer rely on the predictable outcomes they built their daily confidence upon. They look at their phone, they look at their social environment, and where your constant, predictable energy used to be, there is only a stark, unyielding silence. This silence is not empty. It is heavy with the weight of their own insignificance. They are forced to confront the terrifying reality that they no longer possess the emotional leverage to keep you in their orbit. The security they took for granted has vanished, and because the human ego cannot tolerate a loss of status, their subconscious mind goes into overdrive. They begin to hyperfixate on your sudden autonomy, analyzing every past interaction to find the exact moment they lost control of the narrative. By stepping outside of the loop, you have effectively turned their own psychological mechanics against them, shifting the entire burden of uncertainty from your shoulders directly onto theirs. The illusion of control is one of the most powerful narcotics the human ego can consume, and for a long time, this person was deeply intoxicated by it. In any lopsided relationship dynamic, the individual who is being chased constructs a complex mental scaffolding based entirely on the assumption of their own absolute dominance. They don't just believe they are preferred, they believe they are essential to your emotional survival. They view your affection not as a gift you freely choose to give, but as a tax you are obligated to pay just to remain in their presence. Because you consistently paid that tax through endless texts, constant reassurance, and immediate compliance, you inadvertently built a throne for them to sit on. This established an artificial hierarchy where they viewed themselves as the grandmaster and you as the predictable chess piece that could be moved, stalled, or sacrificed at their whim. They felt safe in their mistreatment or neglect of you because they possessed the ultimate psychological leverage, the unwavering belief that you lacked the strength to ever permanently walk away. The exact millisecond they realize you have stopped chasing, that entire throne collapses into dust. It is a violent, destabilizing psychological shockwave that completely shatters their sense of reality. The human brain operates as a prediction engine, constantly calculating outcomes to maintain a feeling of safety and control. When you suddenly withdraw your energy and go completely cold, their prediction engine suffers a catastrophic system failure. They are instantly plunged into a state of severe cognitive dissonance. This is the acute mental distress that occurs when a person's deeply held belief system is violently contradicted by reality. Their internal belief system says, "I am the one in control, and they will always chase me." But the external reality says, "They have disappeared, they are thriving, and they don't care." These two conflicting concepts cannot coexist in the human mind without causing intense psychological friction. To alleviate this agony, their ego triggers an immediate, predictable state of panic. The illusion of dominance they spent months cultivating is replaced by an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. They suddenly realize that the power they thought they held over you was never actually theirs to begin with. It was a loan that you have just summarily recalled. Without your chase to validate them, they are forced to look in the mirror and confront their own raw, unvarnished insignificance. This loss of perceived control terrifies the primitive centers of the brain, which associate a drop in social dominance with a threat to survival. The silence you have generated becomes a mirror that reflects their own emptiness back at them, forcing them to realize that while they were busy playing games and taking you for granted, you were quietly building the resolve to render them completely irrelevant. When an individual is suddenly stripped of the attention they took for granted, they do not gracefully accept the new reality. Instead, they enter a highly predictable mechanical cycle of tactical panic. Human behavior under the threat of loss is remarkably consistent, operating almost like a software program responding to a system error. The moment the silence sets in and the target realizes the chase has ended, their brain initiates the first behavioral phase, the scouting probe. This is an exercise in low-risk reconnaissance. Because their ego cannot handle the humiliation of a direct rejection, they will never reach out with a genuine apology or a vulnerable admission of exposure. Instead, they send a text that is deliberately designed to be as low effort and casual as possible. It might be a single word, a completely random meme, a question about a trivial matter, or a late-night interaction on social media. The sole objective of the scouting probe is to test your emotional baseline and gather intelligence. They want to see your response time and gauge your emotional temperature. If you reply immediately, or if your response carries any hint of anger or eagerness, they have achieved their goal. They have proven to themselves that the line is still active, your silence was just a temporary bluff, and they still retain ultimate control. However, if their scouting probe is met with the absolute zero of your continued silence, the system error deepens, and they are forced to escalate into the second phase, the validation test. This phase is characterized by a volatile shift toward anger, resentment, or hyper-exaggerated indifference. Since they could not coax you back into the loop with a casual gesture, their ego attempts to force a reaction out of you. They might post meticulously curated content on social media, aggressively showcasing how incredibly happy, busy, or unbothered they are without you. This is a theatrical performance staged for an audience of exactly one person. Alternatively, they may weaponize microaggression, sending a message that accuses you of being cold, dramatic, or immature. This is a classic psychological inversion technique. They are attempting to project their own internal panic onto you, trying to trigger your guilt so that you will break your silence to defend your character. If you hold your boundary and refuse to participate in the theater of the validation test, their psychological architecture begins to genuinely fracture, leading them directly into the final and most dangerous phase, the frantic reclamation. This is the moment the target pulls out the heavy artillery because the panic has overridden their pride. In this stage, they will suddenly switch tactics and offer you the exact vulnerability, affection, or accountability that you were begging for months ago. They will say exactly what you have been dying to hear, making statements like, "I've been doing a lot of thinking," or "I never realized how much you actually meant to me until now." This is not a sudden awakening of genuine love. It is a primal, adrenaline-fueled panic response to the total loss of a resource. The human brain hates losing an asset far more than it enjoys acquiring a new one, and they will say or promise absolutely anything just to escape the agonizing discomfort of your silence. To truly read the landscape of a crumbling ego, You must stop listening to what this person says and start tracking their involuntary behavioral metrics. When a target realizes the chase is ended, they will almost always attempt to project an external image of absolute calm, indifference, or superior detachment. However, the human nervous system is an incredibly poor liar. The psychological panic caused by your sudden withdrawal of energy inevitably leaks out through a series of highly specific microexpressions, digital anomalies, and behavioral tells that expose their desperate need to regain control. The first and most quantifiable metric to analyze is the shift in their digital proximity and response latency. When you were actively pursuing them, their response times were elongated and erratic. They would take hours or even days to reply because your presence carried no urgency. The moment you stop chasing, that latency metric violently compresses. You will notice that when they do reach out, or when you happen to cross paths in a shared digital or physical space, their actions carry a frantic, rushed quality. They are operating under the influence of cortisol and adrenaline, which destroys their ability to execute timed, casual pauses. Another critical behavioral tell is the phenomenon of forced casualness. When they communicate, their language will often be dripping with an unnatural, over-rehearsed indifference. They might use overly informal slang, excessive punctuation, or emojis that they never previously utilized, all in a desperate bid to signal to you that they are completely unbothered by your silence. In behavioral profiling, any sudden, unprompted deviation from an established linguistic baseline is a red flag for deception. They are actively trying to deceive you into believing they are at peace, but the very fact that they are expending cognitive energy to construct this specific mask proves that your absence is dominating their thoughts. Furthermore, you must watch their micro-behaviors on social media and shared networks. A person who is genuinely indifferent simply moves on. They do not look back. A person who is panicking, however, will begin to leave digital footprints. You will observe them viewing your status updates within minutes of posting, liking old content, or appearing at the top of your viewer lists with mathematical consistency. This is a subconscious manifestation of their surveillance instinct. Their brain is demanding data to confirm whether you are truly gone or if you are simply playing a game. And because they cannot ask you directly without losing face, they are forced to scavenge for clues in your digital wake. Finally, look for the leakage of microexpressions during any face-to-face or voice-to-voice encounters. When they see you or hear your voice acting from a place of genuine neutrality, their face will briefly betray them before the conscious mind can override the reflex. Watch for the sudden, brief tightening of the jaw, the micro-frown, or the hyper-fixated eye contact that lasts just a second too long. These are the physical manifestations of an internal power struggle. Their brain is actively fighting the urge to demand validation from you, while simultaneously trying to maintain a facade of dominance. They are trapped in a state of hypervigilance, constantly scanning your demeanor, your tone, and your body language for any sign that the old, accommodating version of you is still hidden underneath the surface. By training your eyes to detect these subtle, leaky behaviors, you strip away the illusion of their power and see the raw truth. Behind their wall of manufactured pride, they are completely unraveling. Achieving the sovereign threshold is the ultimate objective of this behavioral shift, representing the transition from a state of reactive emotional dependency to a position of absolute psychological invulnerability. When you first stop chasing, your initial silence is often fueled by a mixture of anger, strategy, or resentment. You are holding back your energy, but your focus is still entirely anchored to the target. You are waiting to see if they notice, waiting for the scouting probe, and secretly hoping they panic. In the early stages of behavioral profiling, this is recognized as a false neutrality. It is a fragile state because you are still playing the game on their board, and your internal emotional climate is entirely dependent on their next move. The sovereign threshold, however, is a permanent structural upgrade to your psychological architecture. It is the exact moment when the silence stops being a tactical maneuver designed to get their attention and becomes a foundational boundary designed to protect your peace. You cross this threshold when you stop caring about whether they are panicking, whether they are posting on social media, or whether they are planning their next frantic reclamation. When you occupy this space of genuine emotional neutrality, you become completely unreadable and entirely immune to their desperate counter-strategies. A target who is panicking because they lost control will naturally escalate through their behavioral phases, using manipulation, feigned indifference, guilt tripping, or sudden unearned vulnerability to breach your defenses. If you are operating below the sovereign threshold, these tactics will trigger an immediate emotional spike within you. You will either feel the urge to fight their anger, defend your character, or instantly surrender your position the moment they throw you a crumb of fake affection. But when you are anchored at the sovereign threshold, their entire psychological playbook falls completely flat. You look at their text messages, their sudden digital proximity, and their calculated performances not through a lens of emotional desperation, but with the cold, analytical detachment of a scientist observing a predictable chemical reaction. You see their anger not as a personal attack, but as the loud, dying gasp of a fracturing ego. You recognize their sudden vulnerability not as genuine love, but as an adrenaline-fueled attempt to escape the agony of rejection. By maintaining this absolute neutrality, you strip them of the only currency they have left, your reaction. The human ego cannot survive in a vacuum where its actions yield zero emotional feedback. When they throw anger at you and receive total indifference, their power evaporates. When they throw charm at you and meet an unyielding wall of silence, their manipulation loops back and consumes them. This level of sovereignty fundamentally rewrites the power dynamic because it proves to the target that they no longer possess the capability to move your needle. You are no longer a variable that can be manipulated or an option that can be shelved and pulled down when they are lonely. You have completely removed yourself from their hierarchy of control.